what convinced you to leave the university and go to Afghanistan? What were you doing in that period?
So I was brought up as a devout Muslim, and from an early age as a highly politicized Muslim and Islamist. I joined my group at the age of 13, and we used to talk about Islamic State, Caliphate, Sharia, Jihad, the Ummah, the Muslim nation all the time. And so at the age of 19, when I got the opportunity, whilst at university, to go to Afghanistan to fight in the jihad, take part in the jihad against the communist forces, just after the Soviets had withdrawn. It was 1990 to 91. I jumped at the chance and thoroughly enjoyed it. Military training, military action, including a day and night at the front line. Our group sent maybe 24 fighters to Afghanistan, and then within 2 years after that, the Bosnian War started in Europe, and our group sent over 100 fighters there. At least 1,000 British men went to fight there. I wanted to go and fight, but wasn't able to. And the sympathy stayed with Afghanistan, Bosnia, Chechnya. A small number of Brits went to Chechnya also. So there was a kind of sympathy for all wings of the Mujahideen movement. One wing became Al-Qaeda, and there was still that sympathy around the world for them after 9/11. In fact, Al-Qaeda tried to recruit me after 9/11, but I politely said no and concentrated on my intellectual work in terms of bridging the gap between Islam and the Western civilizations, because I am a Westerner as well as an Easterner in background. I'm a devout Muslim as well as educated in modern science at Western universities. So I felt I had to bridge all of these things. But slowly, as you grow up and as you learn, I learned more and more about the scripture, about the Quran, and deeper interpretations, different interpretations. And it made me realize that my views on Islam used to be very narrow and very shallow, very sectarian, very anti-Sufi, anti-Shia, very anti-non-Muslim. But now I had lots of friends who are not Muslim. I did a lot of interfaith work. I had a lot of Shia and Sufi friends, for example. The old ideas did not work, did not make sense. Plus, also, I'd seen the danger of those ideas. So, for example, in '92, when the Mujahideen took Kabul in Afghanistan, they were supposed to have a glorious, peaceful Islamic state after that. But instead, they had 4 years of a vicious civil war between '92 to '96, where the Mujahideen leaders fought each other and killed each other. And that made me realize that the criticism I'd heard of political Islam, or excessively political Islam, were correct. That a lot of it was about money and power and influence, and not about other things.
So yeah. There wasn't a single switch that made you change your ideas. It was more a gradual process.
In my case, there was no single event which changed things. It was a gradual process of thinking and reflecting about my views and beliefs and attitudes and work. And over the years, many things added up. So the infighting amongst the Mujahideen groups, the weaknesses within the ideology or the narrative of Islamism, the fact there were many broader and deeper interpretations of Islam, the fact that history, Islamic history, didn't fit with a simple narrative of good versus evil, or that everything had been okay until the end of the Caliphate. So I realized that there were many of my ideas and beliefs which did not match up to reality, plus the experience of just growing up, getting married, having children, bringing them up in a Western society like Britain, comparing that with a country like Pakistan, where I lived with my children and wife for a year after 9/11 actually, and working in British industry and in some of the top British companies and universities, and having lots of friends who are not Muslim, and realizing how the world is interconnected. The modern world is deeply interconnected. You can't just create a separate Islamic state or Christian state or Jewish state and create a kind of pure environment, religious environment like that. There has to be cooperation, there has to be coexistence. And all of these ideas worked out in my mind, and you put them into practice in life, which is why I'm now here at Quilliam, trying along with others to combat extremism and promote a balanced, moderate, inclusive approach to Islam, which is what I believe the true nature and essence of Islam is. It is based on mercy and compassion, on the love of God, and on the love of fellow human beings. And that's a very important aspect of Islam which needs to be heard in today's times.
You didn't quote explicitly violence as a reason why you changed your mind, but
The one thing which led me away from the jihadist groups was the fact that they strayed from legitimate, justified jihad of self-defense, say in Afghanistan or Bosnia, because there were foreign invaders there, the Russians and the Serbs. There was ethnic cleansing going on in Bosnia. And so in my view, at the time and still now, those were justified jihads to some extent. But when the so-called Mujahideen groups then strayed into terrorism with Al-Qaeda, 9/11, the Bali bombings, Beslan, the London bombings 2005, it was very clear that there was no excuse for this, there was no religious justification for this. And so I had to take a stance against terrorism while still affirming and promoting a true idea of jihad, which is a just war or a holy war. But in our times, perhaps the best jihad is non-violent jihad, peaceful approaches to world problems, to conflicts, peaceful resistance. Or as the Prophet Muhammad said, the greatest jihad is to speak a word of truth to a tyrant ruler. So that's a type of non-violent jihad, but it's about being dedicated to God and to truth and trying to uphold justice and being ready to give your life if necessary for that. It's the same idea of jihad and martyrdom, but a much more humanitarian, humane and inclusive aspect. Whereas the jihadists and terrorists now just glorify violence for the sake of violence. They think any kind of violence is somehow jihad, and that is a real problem causing so much conflict around the world.